Hmm. And like the whole point of this project in a way was to try to understand this whole reality thing, and looking at it from many different perspectives: science, teachers, I mean, spirituality, religion, philosophy, and so on. Because I feel like our whole fundamental problem is that we just can't seem to get along together as humanity. And to me, it seems like our problem is our conditioning, our beliefs, our assumptions, our theories. And in a way,
Hmm.
that's the whole intention of this project in the first place.
Hmm. Well, that's exactly right. I agree with that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that point of view. Hmm.
Okay, well, we'll have a good discussion then. So, I was hoping to begin the dialogue by asking the question of what is disorder? What is disorder? If we look around the world, there's obviously climate change happening, there's people killing each other, there's war, and I would like to address what is the fundamental problem?
Okay. Well, I can answer that from two different perspectives. One, of course, science has a way of measuring disorder. There's a term for that, okay, and that's entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder, and lowering entropy is having less disorder, uh, more order, more connectedness. And in physics, this comes out of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics. And in physics, there's two equivalent expressions of this. And if you think about it, you can see that they really are equivalent, even though they sound pretty different. And one is what I said with disorder. Disorder is higher entropy, order is lower entropy, but also it's an ability to be functional, an ability to do work is what they would say in physics, but it's ability to do something useful, to have an effect. So when you have disorder, you have less of an ability to actually produce something, to connect, to create. All of that is much less. You have low entropy, and you kind of automatically produce things, generate things, create things. So it's not only just a matter of being dysfunctional, but it's worse than that. It really gets in the way of you trying to be functional. It's dysfunctional in itself, but it also suppresses functionality. All right, so that's just from kind of a scientific sense of the disorder. But what is disorder? What's its source? What's the root cause? I can say that in a single word: fear. It's all about fear. Now, I don't necessarily mean like fear of the big bear in the woods. I mean fear, well, it's that, but also fear of being inadequate. Insecurity is a fear. Fear of not being good enough, fear of not being appreciated, fear of not being loved or cared for, fear of not being right, fear of getting it wrong, fear of not performing well, anxiety. All of those things all stem from fear. Um, Fear is also the father of two other things. One's called ego, and for the most part, also beliefs. Our beliefs come out of fear. So if we want to break it down, though, fear's the bottom line. We want to go up a level or two, we'd say, well, it's ego in the sense of self-centeredness. Everything's about me. It's about what's good for me, and I really don't care about anybody else. Somebody else is having a hard time, not my problem. And if I can get more of what I want by running over top of and hurting other people, well, not my problem either. You see, that's arrogance, that's ego. And it's ego based on fear. And between the fear and the ego, we come up with a lot of beliefs, the way we think things are. And we believe in something called social Darwinism, which is really just a very poor and unfortunate excuse for some people over overrunning other people. And that goes that it's the survival of the fittest. If if you and I are trying to negotiate something, and I can take advantage of you, well, that's just because I'm smarter or I'm better at negotiating or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. You can take advantage of anybody. You can even hurt other people if it does good for you. You can charge them more than it's worth. You can, try to manipulate them to do what you want. And that's fine. And people write that up as just being smarter and cleverer. That's okay. And the people who are more valuable are the smartest and cleverest people, and they rise to the top. That's the survival of the fittest. So, see, with that idea, then worth of an individual is counted in terms of how much money do you have. That's kind of what your worth is as an individual. So even people who have, 40, 50 billion dollars in the bank have to get more. They need more because that makes them feel more worthy, more significant, top of the pile, king of the hill. And that's what motivates them. So that's a belief. It's just an idea that the strongest are the best. And that's not really where human value comes from at all. Human value comes not from what can I get and what have you got. It comes from what can you give? How can you help? How can you serve? That's where human value comes from. So where does all the disorder, negativity come from? It comes from fear. And that fear, we express that fear in our personalities as self-centeredness, greediness. It's all about me. I don't trust anybody else. I got to make sure I get mine, and nobody else in the world is really, that doesn't matter that much to me. Uncaring. That's just self-centered. And if you think about it, the degree of self-centeredness is really the measure of maturity in a human being. Children start very self-centered. That's the way they are. They're very small. They're in this big, scary world, and they have no power whatsoever. And it's all about them. And they see the world that way. So you talk to a 2 or 3-year-old, and they obviously are at the center of their own universe. And that's appropriate for children. That's where we start. But as we mature and grow older, we become aware of other people. Then we learn to be considerate of other people. Then we learn to be polite and pleasant and maybe even helpful or caring of other people. So a measure of a person's growth of their maturity, I think it's a good word, is the degree to which they are not self-centered. And we all know people who are, 50, 60 years old and are very self-centered. Well, they're still children in a very basic way. They've never outgrown that 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old mindset of it's all about me. And those people who feel that might makes right and the big and the strong get to prey on the weak because that's just the nature of things. That's natural. That's just the way it is. And they use that to justify their bad behavior. It's just fear on their part. And they are self-centered. It's about them. As long as they get what they need, then that's what's important. The rest of the possibilities in the world are not that important. So that's why we have, in a nutshell, that's why we have so much dysfunction, so much disorder in the world. And we express that in thousands of different ways. There's just all kinds of ways you can express that. If you have a fear that, let's say, you're just insecure, you're not quite sure you're really what you should be, you don't feel like you're as you've really lived up to your potential. Then there's a couple of, yes, there's a dozen ways to express that, but two on opposite ends are you become a shrinking violet. You don't engage. You kind of stay off on the sideline because you don't feel good about yourself. And also the opposite, you become arrogant, you become pushy, because that's how you cover up that sense of being inadequate, is by being pushy, knowing everything, bullying other people. The person that's the bully bullies other people because they feel insecure and inadequate themselves. And that's a technique they have for making themselves feel better about themselves. So people who are full of fear also generally don't like themselves very much at a deep level. And that not liking themselves very much tends to make them angry, because whenever anybody says or does anything that kind of triggers that fear, they respond with anger, because that anger denies the fear. That anger says, it's not me, it's you. And we blame everything in our life that's negative on somebody else, rather than taking ownership of it and taking responsibility. If we're unhappy and miserable, it's because we've made bad choices. And nobody comes to that conclusion. They come to the conclusion, I'm miserable because of you and you and you and all those stupid people out there and so on. They blame everyone but the person who's really responsible, which is them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically what's wrong.
And Tom, if that is our disorder, which seems to be the case, our self-centered behavior, our fear, and any action that we do out of fear, out of self-centeredness, will naturally create disorder. I see that. And if we are to truly do something about it, what do you think we can do? To me, it seems like these questions must be raised at an early age, perhaps school, but our educators must be aware of these things also. And it also seems to me that it is possible to understand fear and therefore transcend fear so we can live a life without fear. But all of that begins with knowing ourselves very deeply. So, do you feel like it's important to look into it very carefully and examine what this fear is? And then, out of that examination, out of that understanding, we can perhaps find out how to end fear
Yes, but we have to do that on a personal level.
on a personal level.
Okay? It has to be on a personal level. We're talking about growing up, becoming less fearful. And that has to happen on an individual level. You can't push anybody else to grow up. You can't fix people. They have to fix themselves. And in as much as you try to fix other people, you just make the situation worse. You're not making it better. So you have to learn to accept people as they are and not try to not see everybody as somebody you need to help do the right thing, where your definition of the right thing is what you want. That doesn't work. So you have to do things that encourage other people to grow themselves up, to make good choices, to make choices toward low entropy, not toward high entropy, to make choices of love and caring and consideration, compassion, cooperation, all those things that are about other, not about self. So how do we encourage people to do that? Well, we can stop encouraging people to feel bad about themselves, because that's where it starts. Mostly it's people who aren't happy with who they are and with what they are and what they've become, and who feel inadequate. And a lot of that comes just out of our culture. Our culture tends to create that. We are a very competitive culture. We want to compete in everything. No matter what we do, if there's any action that can possibly be taken, then a bunch of people will want to compete on who can do that action better. We are a very competitive bunch of animals, and competition in a friendly, positive way is a good thing. Because I'll be a better swimmer if you and I each try to swim faster than each other. That's good. It'll spur me on. It'll help me, give me a goal to swim faster than you do. Okay, so that's nothing wrong with that. But where it turns sour is where the winners feel superior over the losers. Because in any competition, there's going to be one winner and a whole bunch of losers. Unless it's just two people. If it's a competition with 20 people, then there's going to be a winner and 19 losers. So if that winner then feels, I'm better than those other people, not just that I'm a better runner or swimmer or, I write better sentences or something, but I'm a better person, and they feel superior, and they feel that the other people are not their equal and they're not as good. Now we've stratified that competition into creating losers that are not as good as the winners. And the losers feel not as good as the winners. Now, if our culture competed, but then after the competition was done, the winners just felt like, well, it was a good day for me, and I've worked hard, and I've practiced a lot, and wow, I'm glad I was as good as I was. But not a feeling of I'm better than those other people, because we take that I'm better of that very specific thing, which is how fast I can swim, and turn that into an I'm better in a very general way. And we just do that automatically. We don't leave that betterness in that specific category of action. We feel superior. And what that does is it builds up ego, positive, I guess. I don't know. There's no ego. Ego is a negative thing. We build up some people and tear down others. And a person who, let's say, doesn't have the time to practice as much, or doesn't have the time, or doesn't have the body build that's right for it, or doesn't have whatever, but enjoys swimming just the same, eventually they feel like they're just not as good. They just can't be as good. And instead of just having that I'm not as good on that specific thing, like swimming fast, they feel not as good as a human being, as a person. So that's one thing. We're very competitive, and we're competitive in a way that the winners are given more than praise. They're given status. They're given, it's not just that they can do something better than other people. It's that they become more important, more significant people. And the losers become less important, less significant people. And you see, that's a problem. Now we're creating fears in people, and people who are not very satisfied with themselves. In our families, how do we treat our children? Well, in the nuclear family, which is kind of the thing that's been around now for the last probably 150 years, mother, father, children living together in one unit, nuclear family. Well, typically the way it works is that if the children are being bad, you fuss at them and try to correct them and tell them, no, don't do that. Stop screaming. Stop hitting your brother. We give them negativity. And if they're good, we ignore them because children are being nice. They're playing well. We need to get our work done. We need to make dinner. We need to clean up. We need to do the homework we have to do from the leftover in the office. We have all these things we need to do. We need to just talk to each other, the husband and wife, and they ignore their children. So the children learn that there's only really two states they can be in. One, they're doing it wrong and are being fussed at, or they're doing it right and they're being ignored. The state of where they're doing it right and everybody smiles and is happy because, you know, they're happy with the children and they're interacting with them and giving them time. Most children don't live in that kind of a positive household. Most children live in a household where they're either ignored or they're wrong. So they learn that they're not very good. That causes them to be insecure. Insecure causes them to have fear. They start making choices out of that fear. Again, they could be shrinking violets or they could be bullies, but it becomes dysfunctional. And then you have lots of people, things like insecurity is, it's ubiquitous. It's probably, 99 people out of 100 walking around with insecurities. Well, all those insecurities nudge them to make poor choices, not good choices. They make choices because of being insecure, not in spite of it, but the insecurity, the fear starts driving their choices. And as they grow up, those little fears start to take on a life of their own. For instance, one of the persons I'd worked with, and they were working on their fears, and they realized that when they first started to really feel inadequate and bad about themselves was one day their mom came home and she had a teddy bear for their little brother, but she didn't have anything for them. Well, that's because the little brother was still like 4 years old and teddy bears was his thing. The older child was like 7 or 8 and kind of growing out of the stuffed animal phase of his life. So the mom didn't get him one because it didn't seem to be like that was necessary. And the mom was just there and there was a special on teddy bears and she thought of her youngest child, so she got one. Well, from the parents' point of view, nothing important happened. It's just, there wasn't anything significant going on. And from the point of view of that child, though, they weren't good enough. That the parents evidently liked the younger sibling better than them. Now, that wasn't true, but it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. That was what they thought. And from then on, they saw themselves as not good enough. By the time they're 50 years old, that's a deep ingrained belief that generates dysfunction all through their life. So what can we do as a culture? Well, we can start being nicer to each other. We can get over this, I'm better than you because I can swim faster than you. Well, swimming faster than somebody doesn't make you a better person. Let's talk about the quality of you as a human being. What's your human quality like? Now, that's something that does make you a better person. Not to make you feel better, but just you're nicer. And I should add here that there's a big difference between, let's say, being kind and caring and acting kind and caring. Those two are miles apart. Now, they look the same. When you look at somebody that's acting like they're kind and somebody that is kind, they pretty much look the same. But there's big difference there. So we're not talking about changing people's behavior. That's acting kind. We act kind because we have fear, and that fear makes us want to develop an image that other people will like, an image that other people accept. So we're polite, as our culture teaches us to be. We're kind sometimes, as our culture teaches us to be. But if we're not actually that way, we're just acting that way because our culture says we should act that way, then when we run into that situation that, the shit hits the fan, where things get hard, then we're not kind. We can be abusive because we never actually grew up to the point of being kind. We've just acted that way. Our culture only tends to enforce behavior, not actually being. So that's another issue. We're not all that interested in what's really inside. We want to only know what shows, and we don't have that kind of sense of image versus reality. In the outside world that we both live in, image is more important and more significant than is reality. Who you really are isn't important because you keep that hidden. How you act, what you say, what you do, how you live up to that image, that's important. That's how people judge you, is by your image. And when you get a human being where that person who's inside and that image get to be too far apart, they're very different, well, you get a lot of dysfunction out of that person. And you've got somebody who is not who they seem to be. And that generally causes a lot of problems, because when that person gets stressed, who they are comes out. Their image kind of disappears. And you have that nice guy who gets along with everybody at work, but he beats his wife and nobody knows about that. Or he kicks his dog, or he does other things like that. And, nobody really notices that because he's really two different people. So you say, what can we do about it? Partly it's our culture's the problem. Our culture doesn't really value human values. It values winners, and it values people who are polite and nice. But it doesn't really value the human values of being. And we don't try to cultivate it. We raise children who are mostly insecure, and we raise them into a world that is very, negative. We live in a very negative space. If you look at the things that are in our culture, what expresses a culture? It's art, it's music, it's books, it's literature, it's movies. Well, if you think of all those things, the movies, the books, the literature, it's almost all negative. Very little of that's positive. Mostly it's people trying to manipulate each other. This is how the storylines go. These people are trying to make those people do what they want them to do, and those people are trying. It's a bunch of people trying to manipulate each other. Is basically what's at the root of our thing, and we turn that into good versus evil, and that's not bad, but it's often in a very unpleasant way. So even our humor tends to be made in not just having fun, but putting other people down. Our jokes, our humor tend to be at the expense of other people. And that just shows dysfunction. So look at even the comedies. Look at what the kid vids do. What movies that are made for 6-year-olds. They're all about violence. It's hard to make a movie that's not about violence. Everything from Snow White to whatever else. It's all about the good guys fighting the bad guys mostly, and it gives a subliminal message that the way we solve our problems is with force. That's how problems have to be solved. They're not solved by understanding or caring or cooperation. They're solved by force. So we live in a culture where the coin of the realm in our culture is control, power, force. That's, if you've got that coin, if you've got plenty of that coin, you're going to do all right. You're going to float to the top. If you don't have much of that coin, you're going to sink to the bottom and everybody's going to take advantage of you. So, you need that control, power, force. Well, how do you get it? Well, there's a lot of ways. One is to come out of a wealthy family that already has control, power, or force. Another is to work your way through college and, get a degree, then get a PhD, and now you have some control, some power. You know things that you can trade. So you have to go make yourself not only useful, but as powerful with as much control and power as possible. Well, that works in some places like jobs and getting education, but it doesn't work in, let's say, family relationships. If you've got people, you got mothers or fathers, and they see their place is to be in control, manipulate their children, get their children to do what they want them to do, how they want them to do it, and when they want them to do it, then the children grow up in a world of power games, dictators. Might makes right, and that's the ethic. So we grow up with this ethic of what's valuable is control, power, and force, and we're insecure. It's just that, asking what can we do about it, what the reasons are. So that's the point. Our culture is a big part of it. Our philosophies are a big part of it. The fact that we are all given the belief in materialism is a part of it. Materialism says there is no purpose. There is no point. There's just randomness, and we do what we do because that's the physics says that that's what happened next. These things are happening, and physics materialists have to also be determinists because those two are necessary for each other. If you're a materialist, you have to be a determinist. If you're a materialist and you say, well, everything in the world follows the laws of physics, and if I know the laws of physics and I know where everything is now, exactly all the states of everything, then I can compute everything else that's going to happen to the end of time, because it's all just physics and everything just follows the laws of physics. And those kind of ideas that it doesn't really matter anyway, that it's just a material world and there's no purpose to it, that also is a negative kind of thing, because it's not true. It's just not the way it is. There is purpose. There is point to our lives. There is a way that we grow, and a way that we that we become more, and a way that we become diminished. And our culture tends to push us more toward being diminished than the way it is. So yes, the key points here are that fear is the problem, love is the answer, and everybody has to change themselves. The best we can do is to help other people find an environment in which they can change themselves, because changing yourself is scary. You've kind of got life figured out to a point that you're getting along okay. And what if you change something and it made it go to hell in a handbasket? It made it worse. People are afraid of change. Change is something that just frightens people, doing things differently, being differently. If I didn't have my image, well, then nobody would like me. If it wasn't for my image, nobody'd give me any time. But I give this image that I'm smart and smooth and cool and know a lot of answers, but that's just my image. It's not really who I am, but I have to have that image so that people will like me. See, well, that's based on a fear of not being liked. That's based on an insecurity. So in our world, image trumps reality all the time. Image is more important than the facts. And when you have that as if you couple that with control, power, and force being the coin of the realm, well, you end up with a lot of bad actors making bad choices. So we can only fix ourselves. So what is the solution? Fix yourself. Because as you fix yourself, you will help other people fix themselves. You will be a good example. You will show them what a caring person is like. They'll like it. And if you do the opposite, if you're self-centered, you will tend to drag those around you down. You will cause dysfunction and negativity around you. So we need to just become positive and help pull up others just by us being positive. Not because we go out and lecture them and tell them how wrong they are. That won't help. That just makes everything worse. You have to create environments in which people can grow up to be strong and healthy. So that's where we are. And we have to make this change to the point that a significant minority has gotten that message. Even 10%, 20% would be enough. If that many people got that message and worked to get rid of their fears and tried being positive all the time, stop complaining, stop blaming others, and stay positive, that would catch on. And pretty soon there'd be 25% and then 30%. And we could change a lot. We've got all the technology now that allows us to do that. We've never had that before. Never in the history of humanity have we had the technology to make a big change in our culture. We can now. We couldn't before. Before, everything was just local. Everything was local. So you have a little bubble of enlightenment over here, but that didn't last long before it was overcome by the forces of negativity. It got overwhelmed, and it never spread that far. And another bubble will come up over there. So there's been these little bubbles of enlightenment. People understand. The things I'm telling you aren't like brand new. These are things that people have realized all places of all times. There have been people that understand this, but it's always been local. But now our world has shrunk to the point that we do see other people, other places. We do communicate globally now. And ideas can spread and grow globally now. Never could do that before. So this is the very first chance humanity's had to make a big step forward rather than a whole bunch of baby steps that work for a while and then get overwhelmed by the masses of negativity. Stay in the margins. There's lots of those bubbles of enlightenment that are still out there in the margins, but they never quite make it to the mainstream. So it's possible. Now, will we do it? And how long will that take? That just depends. That's what you're doing. See, Dom, part of what you're doing is to try to help raise that level of awareness of people of, hey guys, look around. Do you like it? Is this life that we have here? Is this good? Is this optimal? Is this the best we can do? And I think anybody with even a half of a brain or less would say, no, this is not as good as we can do. This world is not optimized. There's a lot of crap going on here that is dysfunctional. We could do a lot better. Well, if that's the case, we have to outline a path. What's better? How do we do better? And the answer is work on yourself. That's how we get better. Change yourself. Become positive. Stop complaining. Stop blaming things on other people. Realize that your unhappiness and misery and struggle is self-created for the most part. Being happy is not being wealthy. If you look at wealthy people, most of them are unhappy people. They're not happy people. They're only happy when they get to grind somebody else in the dust and make a little more money, because that proves to them that they're worthy, because they come out on top. But they're generally not very happy people at all. It's not about money. It's not about power or control or force. It's about, how can I help? What can I give? How can I contribute? That's the key thing. And everybody needs to think about that themselves and try to make low entropy choices. That is, act with a high quality of consciousness. It's another way of saying the same thing. So that's the key. And just a little example of that. Let's say that you are in this environment, this world with 1,000 other people, and you don't know any of them, and they're all different than you. We have a tendency to dislike and fear things that are different than us. We don't like people who aren't just like us, because we're the gold standard of what's good and wonderful and acceptable. And if it's very different from us, then it's bad and we don't like it. So let's say that you and a whole bunch of other people that are all different than you, none of them are just like you. And each one is very unique. And you're just, I don't know, what do we say? Well, you're just on an island all by yourselves. You and 1,000 people live on this island. Okay, now what can you do? You can fear each other. You can fight with each other. You can try to take each other's stuff. You can try to dominate and get a group of people on your side so that you can overwhelm the people on the other side. You can do all of that, but that'll all end up in being very suboptimal. Or you could all agree to help each other, cooperate, care for each other, learn to do things together. And that would build up the maximum, opportunity for everyone. That would build up something that would optimize the creativity. It would optimize personal freedom. It would optimize, every person there. So that's where we are now. We have to learn to play nice. But it's not just play nice, we learn to be nice. Playing nice comes first. That's our image. Being nice is really what it requires to grow. So it's a very simple concept, really. It's just hard to implement because we have to change who we are, not just act better, but be better. Sorry to talk so long. I don't want this to be a lecture. I want this to be an interaction, but over to you.
I see that. And it may seem like we're just like we've been talking about fear and the inner for the past 40 minutes or so. But no matter how hard we look, it does seem to me that without the inner change, there cannot possibly be the outer change, meaning the science that we do, the technology that we create, the AI systems that we create, if we do it out of fear, like you said, out of selfishness, out of the self-centered behavior, any action that we do will be a disordered one, right? So I feel
Yes.
like this is the most practical thing there is to speak about these things, to talk about these things, and to understand our own inner world. Because without that, how can we possibly change the outer? So I found that beautiful. And I just think
Yeah.
it's without that inner change, how else can we change? And like you said, we have to begin as individuals.
Yeah. You can't change somebody else. As soon as you go to somebody else and say, you're wrong, and here's how you
Mm,
should be, you just make things worse. Now you've just created more fear, more resentment, more negativity. That doesn't work. You can't do that. So if you go to that person and say, how can I help? Well, now maybe they'll be positive instead of negative. But if you go and say, there's something wrong about you that you have to fix, I know because I'm better than you are, that just doesn't help at all. You can only fix yourself. But in a way, that's good because the one thing that you can change, which is you, is exactly what's important for you to change. You can't change anybody else. Your choices, you have free will, but only in your own choices. You run over other people's free will, and that's not helpful to them. They have to learn, they have to make the choices, they have to be in a safe enough place that they can stretch out and make a better choice, deal with that fear, understand that the problems that they're having in life are mostly self-created. Once they understand that, and it's not blaming everything on everybody else, that changes their whole worldview. And when they change that worldview, then they start to grow up. So we just have to help people see that, but not by telling them that's the way it is, but by being, what was it? Be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah, it's an old piece of advice that is exactly true. That's what we need to do. And we'll find that if we stop complaining and stop pointing our finger at the people that we think are the problem, and we just say things that are positive, pretty soon we'll change who we are. We won't be the same person. If we could just go, like here's a challenge, go for a whole day without saying anything negative, without putting anybody down, without calling, without talking about those stupid people, without saying anything negative for a whole day. That would be hard for most people. They'd have a hard time getting through a day without complaining or without saying anything negative. Complain about the boss, complain about work, complain about, their taxes, complain about, the carpenter came and he didn't do a good job and he left a mess. Just complain. We find lots of things to complain about. Just going through a whole day without complaining. And if you could do that, well, then go for 2 days. Work yourself up to a whole week. And if you could work yourself up to a whole week of not complaining, at the end of that week, you'd feel better. You'd be a happier person. It's that negativity that we express that kind of keeps us locked in this negative rut that we're in. Everybody around us is negative and we're negative too. But you don't have to be. That's a choice. Again, you have free will. You can make the choice not to be negative. You have a choice to go find your children and give them some hugs and tell them that you love them and just spend some time with them, even though there are things you need to be doing. Figure your kids are more important than those things you need to be doing. Those things can take care of themselves. But the kids need that. They don't need to either be wrong or be ignored. So it just takes time. But when you're positive, that's easier. But when it's negative, then all you hear is the kids are making too much noise. I can't get my work done. It's negative. You focus on what's wrong, not on what's right. So when the kids are being nice, well, go sit down and play with them. Get into their game. Be a part of what they're doing. And then they will feel good about that because now what they're doing is good in the eyes of the gods who, take care of them, the parents. And that makes them feel like they're doing it right. That makes them positive. Now your kids will be less likely to fight and complain and do negative things. So it just grows. The more positive you get, the more positive your world gets. And that's the good news. It's not impossible for us to change this world in a single decade. We could go from being a greedy, nasty, control power force kind of place to a place where everybody is willing to be helpful and caring. And we want sustainability. We want things that work for everyone. And we could do that easily in a decade if we just had the will to do it. If we just understood the kind of joy that everybody would have in living in a place like that. And no, cooperation doesn't mean you have less personal freedom. Cooperation means you have more personal freedom. There's more things you can do, more possibilities, not less. They think, oh no, the way you get personal freedom is you got a lot of control, a lot of power, and a lot of force, and you can do any damn thing you want. That's freedom. That's not freedom. You want to be a warlord. You want to be in charge. And that's not freedom. And that will not make you happy. You saddle yourself under a pile of constraints and negativity. Because once you put yourself on the top of the hill, now you have to defend it. Now you have to throw all the other people that want to be on top of the hill. You have to somehow knock them down. So you're constantly fighting and struggling and unhappy about it. It's just a change in perspective is all we're talking about. Doesn't cost any money. It doesn't, it's totally free. You just change your perspective about the way you see life and live it, be it. Don't just intellectualize it and try to pretend to be it, but you have to live it. It has to be the way you are, not the way you act. That's the hard part. That's why we change so slowly. We've gotten a lot better as far as our actions go because our cultures now kind of require nicer people. We learn to be more polite, but that doesn't mean we're really more polite. It just means we're acting better, which is nice. That's civilizing. It's good, but it's not the same as being nice. So inside, we're still negative, unhappy, complain and blame others. That's the mode we're in. Control, power, force. You know, that's the way we think. It's just a matter of changing your perspective a little, and everything starts getting lighter and better and easier and more fun.
And if we examine what a human's life is, it seems like we are born, we go through this educational system, whether we like it or we don't, primary education, secondary education, perhaps college if we're lucky. And then we have a choice. We either get a job, maybe we depend on family or friends or be homeless, I don't know, or we try to create our own business, create our own enterprise. So we have to do something. But it seems like until we reach that point, we are stuck with our parents. We are stuck in our environment. We are stuck in our educational system. And it seems to me that these are the most important years of a human being's life because that's when we're shaping ourselves as a human being. We're understanding ourselves. And if we are in the wrong environment, I feel like that's going to condition us even further because then our
Mhm.
minds are already molded. So it seems to me that although this change must begin with ourselves, we naturally have to do something. As a young person, you have to do something. You have to, I don't know, get money in order to pay for food, clothing, and shelter. In order for you to do that, you have to do something. So I would really love to explore what is that something, but more importantly, could we explore maybe I'm deceiving myself here, but I do feel like everything begins with the educational system, with the educators. And I feel like the educational system has the greatest power for change because that's where the young mind is being shaped. That's when we're beginning to understand ourselves, when we're beginning to understand what we want out of this life and so on. But if we're in the wrong environment, it just seems like it's not going to be very helpful. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is the case. You know, the education system is very important, but the being good parents is also very important.
Yes.
You know, that's maybe even more important. But then the education system is probably next, and it's not so much what we teach; it's how we teach, and it's the things we don't say more than the things we say that are the problem. For instance, when you're at home, basically your parents say, "Do this because I tell you to." You know, you must do this, you must pick up your clothes, you must do your homework, you must go to school, you must, and there's a lot of things you have to do, and you have to do it because the parents tell you to. And then you go to school and the teacher says, do this because I tell you to. You need to do your homework, you need to get the answers to these problems, and you need to do it the way that I show you to do it. If you do your math problem in some other way, it's wrong, even if you get the right answer. You have to do it this way. This is the right way. Don't think that way. You have to think this way. And children only really get to think for themselves, after they have gone through a lot of their formative years where they are figuring out who they are and what they are. So for most of the years that they're becoming, that they're defining who they are and what they are and what it's all about and what's right and what's wrong, all the time they're figuring that out. They're basically, in a
Conditioned.
yeah, in a situation where they're being told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and why to do it. And so they grow up and they get to be older and they can't really think for themselves very well. So they tend to just pick up the collective consciousness from their culture, and they're just sort of like everybody else. And we become a bunch of little, round pegs that fit in round holes. And we do what we do because that's what we do. And that's what our parents want us to do. And now that we're that age, that's what we do. And that's what we make our children do. And this idea of individualism, of being an individual, having your own ideas and your own thoughts and your own reason whys, and tolerating that in our culture. We don't tolerate that very well. When a child expresses his own thoughts and opinions, we tell him, sit down and be quiet. We don't want to hear your thoughts. We don't want to hear your opinions. So children grow up to be insecure, and they live in a life where there are forces outside of them that dictate what happens to them. So when they're in college, it's the same way. There's forces outside of them that they're just going along this path, but they're being pushed here and shoved there. And here are your options. You can, there's door A and door B, but that's it. There's no C, D, and E, even if there really are those other possibilities. So here's what you do. You go out, and then your boss wants to tell you what to do. Here's what I want you to do. Sit down, turn this crank, turn it this fast, turn it this often. And you do it. So life tends to be doing what you're told. That tends to be the nature of existence, doing what you're told. Well, of course, that's terribly frustrating to people. And what they do is they tend to give up a lot of their free will choice to others. They do what they're told. And that seems to be the only choice. And if you are going to be a good little, I don't know what, if you're going to be a good little automaton in this system, do what you're told and just get along and do the same thing everybody else is doing and do it well and do it when we tell you, then you'll be okay. But we should encourage individuality. We should encourage people to think. We should discuss ideas in school. Not just tell kids what to think, but discuss ideas, even the crazy ideas, because you discuss them, and not that you're going to discuss them and say, here's a bunch of ideas, and after we discuss them, I'll tell you which one's right. No, it's not that. It's here's a bunch of ideas, and we'll discuss them, and you guys think about it, and we'll talk about it, over the school year. We'll see what conclusions you come to and how you come to them, and think about these. And if the parents would do the same thing when the kids come home from school, instead of saying, oh, you're talking about what? Well, here's the right answer, So part of our culture is we don't encourage children to be, and we don't give them any practice at discovery. We just tell them what we want them to do. We don't give them much chance to express themselves. It's a very buttoned down little world where, yes, you go from parents' control to school control, to job control. When are you going to be yourself? Well, you grow up somewhere in the cracks, and you generally grow up being insecure because you don't really know who you are. Most people, if you go out and say, what is the authentic you? If I walked up just a guy in the street and I said, tell me, who is the authentic you? Not your image, not what you're trying to be, not how many times you turn the crank at work, and not, all the things you do, but who are you? What's the authentic you like? Most people will look at you and go, what? What's an authentic me? I have no idea what you're talking about. People have no idea who they are at a deep level. They're just part of this culture that keeps on keeping on because that's what it does, and that's what they've been told. And it's been drilled into them since they were 2 years old that just do what I tell you and everything will be all right. Don't think for yourself. Just do what you're told. School tells them that. Work tells them that. Everything tells them that. And as a consequence, it's very difficult for people to one day wake up and say, oh, what do I need to do? Change myself? Why is that? What's the bigger picture? What's going on here? It's really hard for them to do that because all they've done their whole life is what they were told and what seems to work. So You know, it's hard for people to grow up. It's not an easy thing. They're not used to thinking for themselves, seeing big pictures. They're used to living in a little world where if they have control and power, they tell others what to do. And the ones that have more control and power than they tell them what to do. And that's just the nature of relationship. Well, that's not the nature of relationship. Relationship's about giving, about caring, about sharing. But we don't learn a whole lot about that. So school is part of the collective problem, in the sense that we're raising little, almost like little computers, to go through our culture and turn cranks the way we tell them to. Good little, I don't know, I want to call them soldiers, but little, units of production in our culture. And all these good little unit productions should stop complaining and just do what they're told, and everything would be just fine. But it wouldn't be, because everything would be shallow, have little meaning. Everybody would walk around with depression. Everyone would have to be on Prozac, in order to get through that kind of a life, because it's kind of a meaningless life. Doing what you're told doesn't make you feel successful. Doesn't make you feel like you're a person. You want to do more than that, be more than that. So your fear then makes you react with anger and makes you complain, because basically inside you're not really happy. So you complain, you express that unhappiness, and that's your life. That's why people are so negative, so easy to get negative. Our culture's negative. Our movies, our books are all about negative things going on. People hurting other people. The winners and the losers. The heroes and the bad guys. But it's all kind of fantasy in the mind of the average person, because their life is not a life of them learning and growing, making choices, learning from their choices, growing a little bit more, learning more, becoming, bigger pictures, understanding, sharing, caring, becoming parts of things. That's what's significant in life. But we find ourselves just going through the motions, turning our crank, because that's how you survive. That's how you get by. And we've been told since we were 2 years old to sit down and be quiet and do what we're told. And that makes us feel small and not in charge of anything. And then we have to go prove to ourselves that that's not true. So we get an AK, rifle and go out and shoot a bunch of people, because now we're in charge. We're doing something. We're changing the world. Yeah, in a very negative way, but somehow we're now doing it. We're out there actually doing this, because violence is about all we know. That's how we solve all problems. So it's embedded. What I'm saying is our attitudes are embedded in our culture. We're the way we are because of the culture we've created for ourselves. And we just need to break out of it, one person at a time. You can't break somebody out of it. This is a jail that doesn't have bars. Everybody creates their own bars in this jail. And you just have to help people see bigger pictures, a little bit at a time. And people will become seekers because they realize something is wrong. And it's probably the way you got to where you are. They kind of sense that things aren't really the way they ought to be. So they start going out and trying to say, well, how should they be? Where should we go and why should we go there? And they become seekers. And then they go out and they read things and they see things and they get on the internet and 5 or 6 years later, they start thinking for themselves and becoming individuals. Well, they're the exception. Most people never become seekers. They just trudge along, turning their crank, being a good little unit of production in a culture that needs units of production, but doesn't really need individual people so much as it needs a bunch of units of production. So so the seekers then begin to find things and discover bigger pictures. And no doubt they'll run down 2 or 3 rabbit holes that turn out to be blind alleys, that they'll try this and that doesn't seem to work, and they'll try that and that doesn't seem to work. But if they keep on trying to discover, they eventually will find things that do work, and they'll start to grow, and they'll start to realize that life isn't just about turning a crank and being a good little person that does what they're told. Life is about what you can give. How can you contribute? How can you be of help and be of service? And you can start just with the people around you. You don't have to go out and make a big splash. A little tiny splash is fine. You don't have to do great deeds that get you into the newspaper headlines. Just be nice to people around you. Smile a lot. Be positive. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Just don't be negative. And you'll be a little bubble of light, a little ray of sunshine in a lot of people's lives. And that will start coming back to you. We create our own reality with our intentions. By some measure, we influence our reality with our intentions. So if our intentions are negative, we create more negativity. Our intentions are positive, we create more positive things around us. That's just the nature of the reality that we're in, that it works that way.
And I often wondered, what makes somebody want to change in the first place? What makes somebody break away from the culture? What makes somebody move away from society? And the conclusion that I've come to is that when you see the futility of it, when you see the falseness of it, you're naturally going to step away from it. You're naturally going to move away from it and not touch it in a way. And so, could we explore what makes an individual change? What makes an individual transform and go the other direction?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because most people look at the world they're in, look at their reality, and they don't really like it. They feel like they're being pushed and shoved this way and that way. Everybody's telling them what to do and how to do it. They don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like they're really, developing all the potential that they have. They're stuck in a slot someplace. And most people feel that way. But there's 3 different ways that you can go from there. One is to just throw up your hands and say, well, that's just the way it is. Keep chugging. That's like the materialist would say, there is no meaning to life. This is just what you have to do, so just do it and accept it. There's another one that says, get angry, shake your fist, rail at the machine, join groups that are railing at the machine, get a bunch together, get together with a bunch of other people and complain about the machine. Well, that doesn't really help either. All that does is drag you deeper into negativity. And then there's the third choice that says, okay, things are kind of crappy here, but what can I do to rise out of that? What can I do to change my life? So it's not just give up and let it be. It's not just, well, let's complain about it. And then we can pat each other on the back, tell each other how smart we are because we realize the machine's awful and we're complaining about it and we're demonstrating against it and we're trying to mess it up. Okay, well, all that's negative stuff and it doesn't help. It just makes everything worse. You just encourage the bad behavior you're trying to get rid of when you do things like that. But some of the people will take the choice that says, well, how can I change what I do, what I know, what I understand, and how I see things so that I understand and I can grow up even within this system. I don't have to be a part of it. It doesn't have to own me. I'm an individual. I can, what's inside my head is mine. All right, I go to work and I'll grab that crank and I'll turn it. But that's because I need to pay the rent. I need to put gas in the car. I need to give my wife and children clothes to wear and pay a mortgage. So I'll do that. But at the same time, I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to see what this is all about. Find out what's up, what's up, what's important, what's the purpose of all of this, why, how. And they don't get negative. Their solution isn't to just go complain and rail against the machine. Their solution is to change what's going on in their mind, because they realize that this is what's real. This outside world is just a place I live, but it doesn't mean it has to capture my mind. My mind can go beyond that. And if I run into other people who also are growing beyond that, well, we can have conversations, not to complain, but just to help each other understand and grow and help each other, care about each other. And now you start forming a community of people who do care. And now your life gets a lot better, even if you still go to work and turn that crank and do all the things you're supposed to do there because you need to earn money. But your whole life now is taking on more significance. The work is just something you have to do. You work to live. You don't live to work. You don't get your identity from your work you do. You get your identity from the person you've become. So that's the third choice. But most people take one of the other two choices. Let's get angry and fight the machine. Makes the machine worse. Let's just give up and be a part of the machine. Just let it go. It's no sense struggling. Turn your crank and just do what you're told. Those are the two bigger choices. More people make those choices than the third choice, which is to outgrow the machine. Escape it in your mind. Escape it in your own self, your own being, the kind of choices you make. Become apart from the machine, even if you have to turn a crank in order to pay the bills. That's not your whole life. How you treat people, your relationships, your interactions, all those things can be different. It doesn't have to be control, power, force at home or control, power, force with the family. You don't have to live that way. In your own little bubble of existence, you can be kind and caring and considerate, compassionate, cooperative, and enjoy contributing. Maybe you're just contributing to your own family, but that's okay. You're contributing. And you're not saying, yeah, well, gee, I contribute a lot, but I don't get that much back. That's just self-centeredness. It's all about you. So you learn to get rid of that self-centeredness. And now you like giving. You get a lot back when you're caring and helpful. It's more valuable for you to spend those times sitting on the floor playing with your kids than it is to go do that extra work your boss gave you to do at home. Because the work is just work. You're not on the ladder there trying to step on other people to get to the top. You just work to live. So you can change what's going on in your mind and get off the treadmill and start creating your own little place of caring and love and cooperation. And if the other people around you don't cooperate with that, well, it's okay. It's not about what you get. It's about what you can give. So you become a happier person because you can see how you're being helpful to people. And that makes you smile and that makes you happy. So now you're creating your own little bubble of enlightenment wherever you go. And you find other people that are like that. And those are the people you hang out with. And suddenly people are growing together. You're talking about things you figure out, how you understand. And that's where you are, Dom. I mean, that's what you're doing, right? You got to the point that you said, this isn't working. This machine is not right. I'm not growing and becoming as much as I could be. I'm just in a big machine here turning a crank. There's got to be more to it. So then you look for more and you search for more and you go on a podcast and you say, hey, what's happening in the world and why and how do we deal with it? And other people who are interested also of something more, they connect with you and you connect with them and you run into different people and you're on your own path to develop yourself in a way that is more significant than just being a good, element of production. You're going beyond that element of production existence and starting to create a life in your own mind. And it doesn't require that everybody around you change with you. You can become a bright light. You can become a happy, caring person, even if it's just you who are giving. If you can get rid of that ego that says, yeah, but I want to get back as much as I give. I'm only giving because I want to get it back. I'm only nice because I want people to be nice to me. You see, now you're back into your image. You're not being nice because you're nice. You're being nice because you want something. You're being manipulative. You see, there's a difference. Oh, I'll go back and I'll be nice to everybody because then that'll be better for me. They'll be nice to me and I want them to be nice for me. So I'll have to be nice to them. Well, that's fair enough. But now it's a deal. It's a trade. It's like a negotiation. You do mine, I'll do yours. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And life's really not like that either. It's not always a deal and a bargain. Life is just about being kind and caring because that's the way you are, not because you expect to get that back. The relationships you have need to be about what you give, not a deal. Now, people tend to fall in need. They don't fall in love. Love is unconditional. If it's not unconditional, it's not love. If it's okay, I'll love you and you give me these things I want and I'll give you these things you want, and that's a deal. Well, deals aren't love. They're negotiations, bargains, contracts, whatever. And generally, they don't last that long because people change.
Yeah. So where do we finish?
Well, where were we? Let's see. We were talking about how does one break out of the dysfunctional system. So
That was it.
you find yourself in a dysfunctional system. How do you get out? Well, you don't get out by just giving up and saying that's the way it is. And you don't get out by getting angry and trying to fight the system, because that's just more negativity. And you're not going to beat the system. The system is very broad and very deep and has, 300 years of culture behind it. You're not going to beat the system. You'll just make it worse. It's very, very seldom that things evolve suddenly. Evolution is a slow process. But you can change who you are. You don't have to be that hapless little, production unit in the system. You can be as great as you want to be. You can be caring, you can be love. Realize it's not about getting even, it's not about getting back. It's about growing up. The getting even and getting back, it's just ego junk. So you start to grow yourself. You start looking for answers. You try to find bigger and bigger pictures. Find the meaning, find the significance in your life. And you'll find that the significance and meaning in your life is in relationship for the most part. It's how you relate to other people, what you do for other people. And eventually you'll get to the point that your ego will mostly go away, your fear will mostly go away, and you just really enjoy life, even though you're still in the belly of the beast. You're still in this dysfunctional world. But you get to the point that you just enjoy life because you're helping. You're being a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And other people are doing better because of you. And that gives you a good feeling. It gives you a warm feeling. So you do more. You don't worry about what you get back. And I think right when it quit, I was talking about most people don't fall in love really, they fall in need. They have needs, their partner has needs, and if those needs meet and they agree to meet each other's needs, then they become a couple. But love is unconditional. Love is about other. Love is about giving. It's caring. So what we want to do is to become love, become giving. So we are that way, not that we just act that way, that we are that way, and we want to help. So Dom, you're helping by having this podcast. You're making relationships with other people. You're growing, you're thinking, you hear new thoughts, new ways of seeing things. And then you think about those things, and then you change, you grow into another way of being. And if you probably look back on who you were 5 years ago, you probably see you're pretty different now than you were 5 years ago. And if you look back, another 10 years from now, you'll be much different yet because you're growing. Your mind's open. You're not just content to be a unit of production, in a big system. You want to be who you are and find that significant, authentic self and encourage it, be it, live it. And as long as you realize that fear is the problem and you get rid of fear as you go, you'll find happiness and positivity in what you do. Still, even in the belly of the beast. And you will doing the optimum thing that you can possibly do to save the whole world. Because that's your optimum contribution to saving the world, is getting rid of your own fear. Because you can't get rid of anybody else's. You can only get rid of your own. So it's optimal for you and it's optimal for everybody else. So it's, what can I do? How can I help? See, if it was just about you, you wouldn't be doing a podcast. You're doing a podcast because, one, you want to interact with other people and get their ideas, and two, you want to share this with other people so that they can grow too with you. They can help you grow. You can help them grow. That's what communities are for. So you do that instead of just sitting in your room being unhappy that life isn't nice. Go do something about it, Go connect. Don't dig a hole and climb in it. That's not the right way to go. That'll just leave you depressed. We're social creatures. We need each other. We need to connect. We need to be helpful and caring. We need to feel like we're part of the solution and not part of the problem. And as we feel that way, we feel good. And if you feel good about yourself, guess what? You smile a lot and you're happy. And that just keeps building. So that's the solution. Don't get trapped in the anger choice. Get angry, fight it, fight the system. Because that ugly system is not the problem. That ugly system is a symptom of the problem. So we look at those politicians and they're lying and cheating and we say, that's the problem. And those CEOs and executives are grabbing your money and giving you very little for it. And we look at them and say, that's the problem. It's all that greed and nastiness and self-centeredness out there. If we could just get rid of those people, we could get nice people, good people in those things, everything would be better. It wouldn't. It would only be better for a little while. And very shortly, those good people would die of old age or something. They'd go away. They'd get beaten down by the establishment. There'd be very little they could do. They'd get frustrated. But it isn't going to change much because those people that we point our fingers at as being the problem are not the problem. They're a symptom of the problem. The problem is a low quality of consciousness amongst humanity. That's the problem. It's all the fear. It's the control, power, force attitudes in humanity. That's the problem. And when a significant group of humans outgrows that, then those politicians and those CEOs are going to change because they're really just part of us. they will change. They will go, that'll fix itself. And it doesn't really matter what economic system you have. You can have any kind of economic system, and if you get rid of your fear, it'll all configure itself into one that helps all the people and is sustainable and is fair and is just, because that's the way the people are. And the people wouldn't put up with anything else but that. But right now, people don't mind lying, cheating, and stealing as long as it makes them win. You know, it's matter of fact, in our culture right now, lying is not seen to be so much of a bad thing. Cleverness. Oh, that person told lies and you know, gee, did this and that. Aren't they clever? Hey, now they have $1 million in the bank. So we don't mind stretching the truth and kind of being a little unethical if it gives us power, control, and force. But you see, we need to get to the point that no, that's wrong. Lying's wrong. You know, manipulating people's wrong. And when we see that, then we stop being part of the problem. Well, if a significant number of people in the human race stop being that way, so will all the politicians and the CEOs that are that way. That'll all disappear. They'll be replaced by better people. They're just a symptom of the same low quality of consciousness that we're all having to change. So we don't have to go get rid of those people. I mean, if we find somebody good we could put in there, that's nice. Let's put the best person in. You know, that's civilizing again. But we're not going to actually change the system by changing the people. You know, that's like changing all the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? You might make them to where they are now. They're a whole lot more comfortable than they were, but the boat's still sinking. You know, it's not going to make any big difference in the long run. So getting rid of those people shouldn't be the primary focus. Oh, if we just need to get rid of, we need to get those government guys and get those CEOs. We need to get those people straightened out, and that should be a point of our focus. It's a wrong point. You're focusing on the symptoms. Yes, those are symptoms. Yes, those are bad things. Yes, it would be nice to get nicer people in there. Yes, but that's not the problem. If you want to solve the problem, get rid of your own fear. That will solve the problem if we can get enough people to do that. And all the rest of those problems with the greedy CEOs and the lying, cheating, stealing politicians will all just disappear on their own because they just represent us. For that matter, another thing I would say is that if you think this world is dysfunctional, it's no more dysfunctional than we are. Our reality, our world, our machine we live in is the way it is because we individually are the way we are. It's a reflection of us. It's a perfect reflection of us. And when we change, it'll change. But we is a lot of people. We're talking about, hundreds of millions of people. We have to change. And we only can do that one person at a time because change comes from the inside, not from the outside of an individual. You can't force individuals to be kind. You can force them to act kind. You can threaten them, act kind or I'll beat you. And they'll act kind, but that won't make them grow up any. Everybody will appreciate being around more kind people, but it really won't solve the problem. It's the same with the executives. You can take those executives and you can say, you must be kind, but that really won't work. As soon as they get to a place where there's a lot of shade and no sunlight shining in, they're going to be who they are because that's the way they are. So it's a simple problem and it's got a simple answer, but the answer is very hard to implement because we have to get a lot of people to change who they are and why they are. Find the meaning, find the purpose. That is the purpose to your life. This whole reality system we're in has a purpose, and that purpose is to increase the quality of consciousness here, to grow up, become less self-centered, get rid of the fear. That's your purpose. It's why you're here. And you do that by making choices. And if your choices are high entropy choices, then you de-evolve. If they're low entropy choices, you evolve. And how do you know the difference between a high entropy and low entropy choice? Well, you never know the right answer, but the way life works is that you think about it, you try to make the right, the moral, the ethical, the best choice, and then you live it and you learn from it. If you made a bad choice, well, you learn something. You say, why did I make that bad choice? What led me to that conclusion? And you'll find a fear there someplace that made you take that bad choice. Get over it. Now you'll grow. You'll make another choice. Learn from it. So don't be afraid of making choices because you don't know what the right choice is. Make your best guess, but think about what that is. Think about how does this help other people as well as me? How does my choice affect me and other people connected with me and the people connected to those other people? And make your best choice for low entropy and then look at it. Was it good? Everybody's doing better now because of that choice? Well, pat yourself on the back and say, all right, it's good, you're growing up. And if not, find out why not. Why did you make a poor choice? And eventually, 10 years later, you'll be a totally different person. There'll be people all around looking up to you, wanting to know how they can be more like you. And they'll grow up. So that's how you do it. One step at a time, one choice at a time. Every time you make a choice, think, where did that choice come from? Why did I make that choice? And every time you feel negative, upset, angry, annoyed, stressed, whatever, unappreciated, whenever you feel that way, you know that is your fear. Because if you didn't have fear, you would never feel any of those things. You would never have those negative feelings. So if you've still got negative feelings in your life, you still got fear in your life, and it's a good bet that fear is making most of your choices, or at least many of your choices. So it's easy to know when you're out of fear because then you're always happy. Everything's good. Even when something bad happens, you think, this is going to be interesting. How am I going to deal with this and stay positive and come out the other side better than I am now? Even if it was a terrible thing that happened. Instead of saying, oh no, why me? The self-pity route, which is where the fear person goes. So that's the solution. That's how you go about it, one choice at a time. Keep track of your thoughts and look at every thought. Don't judge other people, but you're allowed to judge yourself. You can judge yourself and say, is that negative or positive? Am I feeling unhappy, unloved, annoyed, anxious, angry? All of that's part of the problem. You got to let it go. So, what do you think, Dom?
So, in summary, we're saying our purpose is to become more aware, more conscious. To change the outer, we must change the inner. And the way we do that is to, get rid of fear. Understand what fear is. Transcend it. Be fearless. In summary, is that what we're saying?
That's it. That's a good summary. That is it. But unfortunately, it's a lot harder to do than it is to say. It's an easy thing to say, but it's a harder thing to do. But the way you do it is to have an intention to do it. In other words, you have to really put some energy into that intention, because in this reality, the things we put mental energy into, with our intention, we raise the probability that those things will come about. That's just the nature of this reality. That's why you have a placebo effect. That's why the, what do they call it? The power of positive thinking. That's the way the reality works. So if you are fearful and unhappy, you create fearful and unhappy stuff in your life. If you're positive, you create positive stuff in your life. So be it, think it, have a strong intention. Not that I want to change my behavior, but I want to change who I am. I don't want to be fearful. I don't want to make choices because of my fear. That's the source of all the unpleasant stuff I've had in my life. I want to only make choices that are positive and that are good, not only for me, but for everybody. And if you have that strong intent, it'll change. You don't have to really do anything, just have that strong intent, because that strong intent will make you make choices that are positive and start leading you in the right direction. So it's not, you can't just take us in intellectually. Okay, yeah, I understand. You have to get rid of your fear. You have to, grow up. You have to be nice. You have to make low-energy choices. I got it. That won't help you grow up at all. Getting it in the intellect is maybe a first step, but it's not, it doesn't take you to where you need to go. You actually have to live that, not just understand it in your intellect. You have to be it. And that is what is difficult. It's easy to understand, it's harder to be, but you will be it if you have that strong intent to be it. And you think about it often. Am I being it? What about this choice? Why am I making this choice? Is it all about me? Or is it about others? And don't trick yourself, because a lot of times we'll trick ourselves to thinking that it's about others when it's really about ourselves. Oh, I only tell other people how to be because I'm just trying to help them. Well, that's not you being helpful. That's you trying to impose yourself on other people, your ideas on other people. You couch it in terms of, I'm just trying to be helpful, because that sounds a lot better than I want them to be more like me because I'm right and they're wrong. Doesn't sound very good. That sounds pretty arrogant. So we don't tell ourselves things like that. We tell ourselves, oh, it's just for their own good. I'm just trying to help them do better because I know what they should do, even though they don't. And we believe that. But that's not true. We generally don't know. Everybody lives in their own reality. There's parts of it that are shared, but mostly we create this reality by the way we interpret the data we get. So that's the hard part, is being it. Just keep it in mind and try always to make good choices and to stay positive. And, it takes some months, but 6 months and a year, you'll be a different person, and you'll look back and you'll wonder how you could have ever been that person, before, who was so opinionated and so arrogant. So that's how it works, and that's how you go about it. So we probably got another 15 minutes or so before we come up to the 2 hours. Anything you think your listeners need to?
Well, to be honest, I'm going to, I have a year, and in a way, there's a lot to say, but I'm going to try to say it as briefly as possible, and perhaps we could just take it from there. If I look at the world of science, the world of philosophy, religion, it seems to me that there have been people who spoke about these things, who spoke about philosophy, who spoke about religion, who spoke about science, the various branches, and so on. But essentially, it seems to me that we're all speaking about the same thing here. Science points to oneness, energy, consciousness, whatever word you want to use. Religion seems to be talking about the same thing. And philosophy seems to help us, or tries to help us, arrive at this thing that we call happiness or be free from fear.
Mhm.
And essentially, from your understanding of science, would I be, am I deceiving myself here to say that what scientists pointing towards, no matter how hard we look, it points towards oneness, energy, source, being, consciousness, whatever word we want to use again. Same with religion, and so on. What are your thoughts on that from your years of study, from your background, from your contemplations? I would love to
Sure.
know.
Well, first of all, I guess you know I am a physicist. I'm a scientist, and when I wrote my books, the My Big Toe books, they were mostly to be explain consciousness. How did consciousness work, and what was consciousness? But I eventually realized that once understanding consciousness, you can derive all the rest. So in philosophy, I think that's called idealism, where consciousness is fundamental
Mhm.
and everything else is derived therefrom. But of course, the scientists always scoff, well, how do you derive physics from consciousness? If you start with consciousness, tell me about F equals ma. How does that come out of consciousness? And it does. I've been able to derive quantum physics and derive relativity, which are the two big sciences that kind of tell us all what's going on, and been able to solve all the paradoxes that are in science. There's lots of paradoxes in science. And if you understand how consciousness works, how reality works, you can solve all those physics problems. Quantum physics isn't weird science, it's logical science once you understand what's going on and how it works. It's as logical as any other science. It only seems weird because they really don't understand what's going on. And they're jumping to conclusions that are wrong, and so the whole thing looks weird. Well, they're just looking at it from the wrong perspective. You see it from the right perspective, and what science will tell you is what physicists now, if they're particle physicists or atomic physicists, most of them will say that reality is information based. And they don't want to go past that because they don't know how to go past that. The next step, they don't know. And the people that did the first double slit experiment 100 years ago, in 1923, that's when that was coming together. It's 100 years ago, and they thought, wow, whole new idea about reality. Reality is based on information. And then it kind of just died because nobody knew what the next step was. Yeah, well, what does that mean? And I don't really know what that means. Well, write me an equation, about what that's about. And it's, well, I really can't write any equations about it. So they hit this wall because they didn't know how to understand that fact, what it really meant. But once you do understand what that means, then all the physics falls out. The same with philosophy. The paradoxes in philosophy, the paradoxes in metaphysics, the paradoxes in ontology. That's about being. What is it? The other one. The other one is epistemology. That's about knowledge and truth. And then about cosmology. That's where did it all come from? That all of those has lots of paradoxes in them, and those all get filled in. So yes, it is all one thing. It's all one thing. So at the very top level of understanding, you can derive philosophy, metaphysics, and physics. And besides that, you get an extra bonus, and that is you get an objective model or theory of the subjective. In other words, you get a science of the subjective world. Physics is a science of the objective world. But if you understand consciousness, you get a science of the subjective world. And basically, all the things that we've been talking about, for me, all the things I've been telling you fall right out of that science of the subjective world. This is how the subjective world works. This is what's going on. This is what has to be done about it. This is how we get better. It falls right out of that, and it's an objective science of the subjective, of the mind, of the mental world, who we are, what we are, our thoughts, our thinking, how does it work? Where did it come from? So all of that then gets understood. So you're right, they're all headed in the same direction, but they're only each has a piece of the picture. There is this big picture where everything makes sense. And the scientists, they've got this little chunk of the picture. And the philosophers got another little chunk of the picture. And, religion has another piece of the picture. And they all fight with each other and think each other's wrong. The scientists say, religion and philosophy, that's worthless. It's only science is the only thing that matters. And the philosophers think that the scientists are all lost in the material world and can't think about that. And the religious says it's all about God. And so they all kind of have their own perspective where they're coming from. But when you understand it, you realize, yes, it's all basically part of the same thing. And that's an understanding of the nature of reality, which is an understanding of the nature of consciousness, because consciousness is what is fundamental. So, yes, it all does come together. And all the paradoxes in many fields, paradoxes in almost all the academic fields have paradoxes. And when you understand the nature of reality and understand consciousness, all those paradoxes just disappear. They now have just obvious, rational answers to them. So this idea is just kind of at the apex of the knowledge. It builds or you might say the opposite. It's the foundation of everything else. Everything else is built on that. So consciousness is at the bottom of the pyramid, right? That's the foundation. The next level up is physics. The next level up's chemistry. The next level up's biology. And unfortunately, the materialists put physics at the bottom, then chemistry, then biology, and then consciousness up at the very top as a product of biology. It's it's created by the physical, but that's wrong. It's not like that at all. The physical is really a creation of consciousness and what I call the larger consciousness system. So your intuition is correct. Once you understand the big picture, the biggest picture, then everything else falls into place. And, I found that was kind of startling to me when I got to that point many years ago, because being a physicist, I was pretty much atheist in my viewpoint, in that, the whole God business just seemed ridiculous. And then as I got bigger and bigger pictures, I realized that as I took my science of consciousness further and further, I ended up with a lot of results that the religious people have been saying for, 5,000 years, and I kind of had to laugh at myself. I said, well, I guess those people had at least some inkling of what they were talking about after all, because a lot of the things they say are true. That is the way the world works. Well, okay, they dressed it up with dogma and they dressed it up with all kinds of other junk that isn't true. But a lot of the fundamentals that are there actually come out of a deep understanding of the way reality is and how it works. They don't have any of the mechanics, and they threw a lot of extra junk in that doesn't help, but the basics are there. And the same with philosophy. Philosophy's hinting all around it. They're kind of dancing all around the answer, but they can't come up with the answer because the answer is the nature of reality. It's consciousness. It's how consciousness works. So once you get the big picture, then why science works the way it does, why philosophy gets to where it gets, and the core ideas in religion all come together as people have been trying to figure out, what is this world all about? And they've been figuring that out from all three of those, from religion, from science, and from philosophy. They're all asking the same question: what is this world all about? And they've come to it from their own very different directions. But in as much as they get it right, it's all part of the same thing. So there's a lot of bogus science, there's a bogus religion, and there's some bogus philosophy that's all kind of lost, off in the margins doing things that aren't helpful. But the core of it is good. The core of it is pointing in the right direction. So that's the neat thing. It doesn't matter really where you are or even what you believe. If you just keep working toward finding the truth, eventually everybody will end up in the same place. You see, there's just one truth. There's 1,000 different ways to get to that truth through 1,000 different paths, but eventually and everybody will end up at the same spot, because there is just one truth, that there is just, the nature of our reality and the nature of consciousness, and that's it. But lots of ways to get there. So it's not that here's the path, or this is the right path and those are wrong paths. All the paths will eventually take you there. You can get there through religion. You can get there through science. You can get there through philosophy. You can get there through all those paths. But you have to have a couple of things you keep in mind. One, you must always be skeptical of everything. That's one. And the person you should be most skeptical of is yourself. So skepticism is absolutely necessary. But you also have to be open-minded. Because if you're not open-minded, your skepticism just turns into another belief and you're trapped. So you have to be open to everything. There's very few things that you should give a probability of a 1 or a probability of a 0. Most everything should fall in between, and you change that probability based on new information that comes to you. The other two things are, one, you have to realize that if it's not your experience, it can't be your truth. If you read about it in a book and then you make it your truth, that's a belief. You're just believing it. You have to experience it, or it's not yours. And some of your experience may be misinterpreted. You can misinterpret your experience easily. That's why you need to be skeptical about yourself. So you have to get there, not by listening to somebody talk like me or reading a book like mine. That'll give you the intellectual background, but it's not going to help you actually get too far. You have to experience it. You have to go out into that reality of consciousness and explore it, understand it, feel it, be it, study it, do experiments there, and then it's yours and you own it and it's your truth. So you can't get it just intellectually. You have to experience it. So those are some basic ideas. You have to be skeptical, you have to be open-minded, and you have to have your own experience. Don't take anybody else's word for anything. You have to learn it. And you learn it by paying attention to those choices that you make and finding out when they go wrong, learning, growing. You'll eventually get there. Eventually your mind will open up to the point that your reality is a lot bigger. The size of your reality, I call that decision space. The size of your decision space has to do with how big a picture you have. Many, many years ago, we separated people into those who traveled a lot, widely traveled, and we said they were sophisticated, and people who never traveled at all, and we said they were provincial. But it's not really, I don't particularly like those two words. It's just that one has a broad experience and therefore a bigger picture, and the other has a very limited experience and therefore just a little picture. So how do you broaden your experience? You got to get out there and travel. Used to be you had to travel around from place to place, but now you can travel around the internet. It's all there. Everything about everyone everywhere is pretty much there. So you can, it's cheaper now and easier. You don't have to get on a ship and spend 3 years, because you're wealthy traveling around, getting all that experience. You can get that. All you have to do is become a seeker and go after it and look for it. It's out there. So get a bigger reality. You'll find that there's lots of amazing things about consciousness. Most of the paranormal things are just normal things once you understand the larger reality. They're not paranormal, they're just normal. They're part of consciousness and the way consciousness works. And you'll understand that you're not this body, you're a piece of consciousness. And as consciousness, you're immortal. You just keep growing and having more experiences. This body comes and goes. And there's lots of little things like that you find out along the way on this path. But again, it has to be from your own experience, not because I tell you, or not because you read it in a book, but you can have those experiences. In fact, people ask me, they said, well, you keep telling me I need my own experiences, so how can you help me do that? How can I get that experience? So I started giving courses that enabled people to go into the larger consciousness system and explore it and interact with it and learn for themselves what it was like. And if any of your listeners are interested, that I took all of those courses and summed them all up into one course that was kind of the best of all of them. And you can get that at Soundwise. It doesn't really cost very much. It's like a week-long course, and you can take it. You don't have to do it in a week. You can do it in 6 months. Take it at your own pace. It's an audio program. If you're interested, or anybody's interested out there, that's MBT events, MBT for my big toe, and then events, events.com, and that's the group of people that does my planning. They're like I don't know what you would call them, but they come up with venues, where I'm going to talk, who am I going to talk to. They make all the arrangements. Get the venue, figure out where people are going to eat. They do all of that. I don't do that. And they have most of the things on their site that we actually have for sale. You can find them on their site more. You can probably find them on my website too, which is www.my-big-toe.com. But if you just want to look at these products, that's one. And there's another one for those who have tried to go the normal route, which is through meditation, the normal route to get connected with your consciousness, and consciousness in general has been through meditation. That's just kind of the time-honored way, but there is other way that you don't have to meditate. And if meditation is just, you're having a hard time with that, and you're having a hard time letting go of your intellect, because all the paranormal happens in the intuitive realm, not in the intellectual realm. It's all in the intuitive space. And some people just can't let go of their intellectual space. They live out of their heads, and that intellect just won't sit down and be quiet. And for them, I wrote a very small book that helps you get to the same places without ever learning to meditate at all. And the pathway is through your imagination. And it's a process by which you can take your imagination, which you control, turns into an adventure in consciousness that's not you at all. It's totally out of your control, just like an out of body or other kinds of ways of looking through consciousness. And that's called Tom's Park. And you can find that, same place you find books, like Amazon or someplace, you can find that. So those are ways. When I tell people, if it's not your experience, it's not your truth, then I have to give them ways to help them find that experience, because otherwise, well, how do I get into the larger consciousness system and explore it to find out what consciousness is like if I don't just believe you? Well, don't believe me. Go do it. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. You can learn to do these things. Everybody can learn to do these things. It's not special, gifted people. Just some people have naturally figured them out for themselves and just been at the right place at the right time to learn them. But everybody can do it and do it well. And it doesn't take that long. You can be fairly good at it in, I don't know, 6 months or so if you work at it. It's not like you have to work 20 years to do it. You can do it pretty. You won't get really good at it in 6 months, but you'll do it enough that it's that you will have to come to the conclusion that it's real because it's your experience. Unless you deny your own experience, you have to come to that conclusion that it's real, and it's not that hard to do. So that's kind of the, I guess, as a closing thing that helps people if they want to go further and where they can go, if they want to explore consciousness, where they can go. Now, I also have, I don't know, 1,000 videos or something on YouTube, and I discuss, all these subjects there in great detail. A lot of them are just Q&A, but a lot of them are me just talking about things. So there's also a search engine there. If you go to my website, that'll let you search those 1,000 videos, thousands of hours, because most of those videos are pretty long. You'll look at them, it'll go 3 hours. You got to be kidding. I can't look at a 3-hour video. And that's only 1 out of 10 videos. So it's a lot that's daunting, but there's a search engine that by subject, you can search all of those thousands of hours of video. And in another couple of weeks or a month or so, I'm going to have an AI there that you can talk to that database. You'll be able to have a conversation, and that conversation will be about 80-90% like you're talking to me, because we're going to teach it by giving it all of my material so to learn on. So we're still working on it, trying to improve it. Any AI will sometimes tell you something that's off the wall, something that's goofy. So you always have to, you always have to use your own good sense as to what you get from an AI. You can't just take everything you hear from an AI like that's the truth. That AI is not conscious. All it's doing is coming up with words that it thinks might be appropriate given, the task that it has and the database that it's working from. So it can come up with some really off-the-wall, goofy things. But, it'd be nice to just have a conversation, just like we've been having, on these topics. And you could sit down and have a conversation with the MBT database, basically, and ask it questions. And like any other query system, you can ask a question different ways, you'll get different answers. So you can ask it this way and then ask it differently, and no, that's not what I wanted. I was more wanting this way. And since the AI understands natural language, you don't have to be clever about writing, query sentences or query lines or query words. You can just talk to it. So that's coming soon, and that should be very helpful to people if they have particular issues they don't want to really discuss with anybody else, but they'd like to get the big picture view on it. Then having a chat with that database should be interesting. At least I'm hoping it works out that way. Hopefully it will be 80-90% accurate. It won't be a lot of goofy stuff on it, but I'm sure there will be some goofy stuff. You just can't help it when you have a AI that's making stuff up based on its learning, because it's just learning. It's not really understanding. The AI is not conscious. It doesn't really understand what it's saying. It just, through its experience, comes up with things that seem plausible to it without any understanding. So it's all intellect, no understanding. So anyway, that's kind of a wrap on it, I guess.
Well, I think it is a good time to finish up. I'll link what you said there in the show notes and the description. And before we finish up, is there any other final comments, thoughts, anything at all?
No,
But I just want to say thank you.
well, okay. I think the one thing I might leave people with, it's not as hard as it sounds. Just do it and it'll come to you naturally what to do next. Because it's a part of who you are and what you are. So it's not like a real big, scary, goofy thing that you have to really understand real well. Just have an intent to be better, to be more caring and less negative, and just carry that intent around with you. And that's really, if you do that, you've done a lot. So it's really not that hard. It takes time. You're not going to suddenly, change who you are in a couple of days. It's going to take months, maybe many months, but you'll see it'll all accumulate very slowly. And you will start becoming a happier, more positive person, liking your life more and more. And that's the way it works. So don't be daunted by the 5-hour videos or the immensity of material. Just have a good intent to being positive. I guess that's it.
Tom, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Dom. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
Thank you.
That's what, knowledge, information is great, but shared information is a lot better. If you know something and you keep it in your head, that's not very helpful. If you want to be helpful to people, then you have to share it. And you give me an opportunity to do that. So I appreciate the invitation.
Thank
You're welcome.
you.